Hi. Welcome back to Wolf Heart Tales, where forbidden love howls louder than destiny itself. Before we sink our claws into tonight's twisted tale, smash that like button like you're breaking Wolf's bane chains, and hit subscribe so you never miss a story that'll make your heart race and your soul ache. React in the comments if you believe some mates are worth burning kingdoms for. Tonight's story is a story of light, shadow, and the alpha who'd tear down his throne to save his forsaken queen. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Coronation Disruption. The ancient cathedral of Silver Peak Castle had witnessed 3 centuries of coronations, but none like this. Kael Stormborn, 30th of his line, sat rigid upon the throne of howling wolves while High Counselor Gavel droned through ceremonial verses that predated the kingdom itself. Nearly 1,000 nobles packed the vaulted hall, amber eyes gleaming in candlelight. Wolf blood aristocracy from every territory gathered to witness power's formal transfer from dead father to living son. Kael's ceremonial rings cut into his fingers as he gripped the throne's armrests. 3 hours. 3 hours of pageantry when all he wanted was to escape these suffocating robes and run through the northern forests until his wolf could breathe again. Then it hit him. Pain, no, not pain exactly. Something far worse. Invisible hooks lodging themselves behind his ribs, yanking downward with violence that nearly drove him to his knees. His breath caught. His vision swam. Your Majesty? Gavel leaned closer, concerned about creasing his weathered face. Is something wrong? Wrong? Everything was wrong. His wolf, usually controlled to the point of cold precision, was suddenly clawing at his consciousness with desperate, primal fury. The pull came again. Stronger. More insistent. Down. Something whispered in his mind. Ancient. Undeniable. Absolutely certain. Go down, my king. She's dying. I need. Kael forced words through a throat gone tight. I need air. Even as he spoke, he knew air wasn't what his body screamed for. His wolf was howling inside his skull, a sound of such anguish it should have shattered every window in the hall. Perhaps we should postpone, Gavel suggested, but Kael was already rising. The crowd's murmur of confusion followed him like a physical weight as he strode toward the side entrance. Captain Darius Ironheart, his personal guard, fell into step immediately. Sire, where are we going? Kael didn't answer because he didn't know. His feet moved of their own accord, following that terrible pull through corridors he'd walked since childhood. Down the main stairs. Past the kitchens. Deeper still. The old passages, Your Majesty? Darius's alarm sharpened. Those lead to the foundation chambers. No one's been. Someone's down there. Kael's voice came out rough, barely human. They descended stone steps that grew older with each level, polished marble giving way to rough-hewn rock. The air thickened, musty with centuries of disuse. These passages predated the current castle by generations, built when the first Alpha Kings ruled through blood and brutality. Sire, it's not safe. These chambers have been sealed since. A sound cut through Darius's protest. Faint. Almost inaudible even to Kael's enhanced hearing. Breathing. Labored. Rattling breathing. And a heartbeat. Slow. Too slow. Fading. Kael's wolf went completely feral. He ran, abandoning all pretense of control, following passages he'd never explored. His hands traced walls that shouldn't be warm in these cold depths. The breathing grew louder, punctuated by that failing heartbeat. The passage ended at an iron door marked with symbols that made his skin crawl. Old magic. Binding magic. The kind the modern kingdom had outlawed centuries ago. What is this place? Darius whispered. Kael didn't answer. He gripped the door's handle, and pain shot up his arm. Wolf's bane embedded in the metal. He pulled anyway, his palm sizzling, but ancient locks held firm. The heartbeat beyond the door stuttered. With a roar that was pure alpha, Kael shifted partially, his hand becoming a massive claw that tore through iron like paper. The door shrieked as he ripped it from its hinges. The chamber beyond was pitch black, but his wolf eyes pierced the darkness easily. What he saw destroyed him. A figure lay crumpled against the far wall, chained at wrists and ankles. Female, though so emaciated he could count every rib through her tattered dress. Hair that might once have been golden hung in filthy strands around a face carved to bone by starvation. But it was her eyes that broke something fundamental in Kael's chest. Violet eyes, enormous in her skeletal face, staring at him with a mixture of terror and desperate, dying hope. "Please," she whispered, her voice like broken glass dragged across a stone. "Please don't hurt me anymore." Kael's hands shook as he approached. The chains were bane-laced, and when they touched her skin, they left wounds that wouldn't heal. How long had she been here? Who had done this? "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly, fighting to keep his wolf from emerging fully. It wanted to destroy everything and everyone who'd allowed this horror. "I'm going to get you out." She tried to pull back as he reached for the chains, a whimper escaping her throat that made his heart splinter. "No, please. I've been good. I haven't used it. Not once, I swear." Used what? But even as he asked, he felt it. Power radiating from her in waves despite her weakened state. Not wolf power. Something else. Something that made his wolf wild with recognition. "Mate," his beast howled. "Mate. No." That was impossible. He'd searched for years, attended every gathering, met every eligible wolf-blooded female in the kingdom. His mate didn't exist. Yet here she was, dying in chains beneath his own castle. His claws sliced through the chains, ignoring the burn of the wolf's bane. She collapsed forward, and he caught her, his arms cradling her skeletal frame. She weighed nothing. How long since she'd eaten? "Who did this to you?" he growled. Her violet eyes fluttered. The council said I was an abomination. Wrong blood. Dangerous. Her breath rattled. They said the ceremony would purify the kingdom. That my sacrifice would. Her eyes rolled back. Her body went limp. "No." Kael pressed his ear to her chest. The heartbeat was barely there. A whisper of sound. "Darius, get the healers. Now." But the ceremony. Forget the damned ceremony. Kael gathered her against his chest, standing in one fluid motion. "Someone chained my mate beneath the castle and left her to die." Darius went pale. Your mate? But she's not a wolf blood. I can smell it." "She's mine," Kael snarled. "She's mine and she's dying." He ran, carrying her through the passages, up the stairs. Her head lolled against his shoulder. With each step, her breathing grew shallower. By the time he reached the main halls, he could barely hear her heartbeat at all. The ceremony guests scattered as their newly crowned king burst through the doors, covered in blood and burns, carrying what looked like a corpse. "Healer Lysander." Kael roared. "Now." The elderly healer rushed forward, his hands already glowing with healing light. He pressed them to her chest, then yanked back as if burned. "Your Majesty," he whispered, face going ashen. "This woman, she's been cursed. Repeatedly. For years. And he paused. "She's something that shouldn't exist." "I don't care what she is," Kael said, his voice dropping to deadly quiet. "Save her." "I'll try, but..." Lysander's hands hovered over her body. "Sire, if she's what I think she is, the council will demand. The council will answer for why my mate was tortured beneath my own throne room." As if responding to his words, the girl's eyes fluttered open. For one moment, they locked with his violet meeting gold. Then her body began to convulse. Chapter 2. The Forsaken Light. Briar Nightingale hadn't dreamed in 6 years. In the darkness below, dreams required hope, and hope had been the first thing the chains stole from her. But now she floated in warmth. Real warmth. Voices circled above her like anxious birds, distant but growing closer. Beyond belief. No one survives that much wolf's bane exposure. She's not purely human. Look at her blood. It's literally silver. The king refuses to leave her side. King. The word pierced through her fog like a blade. The king was the one who'd ordered her imprisonment. The king was responsible for everything. Except no. The old king had died. She'd felt it through the stones, the castle's mourning as power shifted from father to son. How long ago? Days? Weeks? Time meant nothing in the dark. Her eyes cracked open, and immediately she wished they hadn't. Light, blessed and terrible light everywhere. After years of absolute darkness, even candlelight felt like staring directly into the sun. She tried to raise her hand to shield her face, but her arm wouldn't respond. Nothing would respond. She's awake. A young woman's voice, excited. Your Majesty, she's... Leave us. That voice. Deep. Commanding. Making something in her chest tighten with recognition. She'd heard it in the darkness, felt it rumble through his chest when he'd carried her. The new king. The one who'd found her. Chairs scraped. Footsteps retreated. A door closed. Then silence, except for breathing. His and hers. Can you speak? Softer now, that commanding voice. Careful. Briar tried. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed sand and glass. Nothing came out but a rasp. Movement. The trickle of liquid. Then a hand behind her head, impossibly gentle for its size, lifting her just enough to press a cup to her lips. The water tasted like life itself. Slowly, he murmured. Your body's been dormant too long. When she'd drunk what she could manage, he lowered her back. She forced her eyes fully open, blinking through tears as they adjusted. He sat beside her bed, and even half-blind, she could tell he was magnificent. Enormous frame, dark hair falling past his shoulders, eyes that gleamed gold even in daylight. Power radiated from him in waves that made her inner light flicker in response. Those golden eyes widened. You're glowing. Briar looked down. Her skin, paper-thin from starvation, emanated a soft silver luminescence. Horror flooded through her. No, no, no. She tried to pull it back, to force the light down as she'd been trained. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Please don't send me back. Please. Stop. His hand covered hers, and the comfort in that simple touch sent electricity through her entire body. No one's sending you anywhere. You're safe. Safe? She almost laughed. I'm a Lightcaster in the kingdom of wolves. There's no such thing as safety. His jaw tightened. How long were you down there? Since my 16th birthday, when the light first manifested. The words came easier now, though each one hurt. The old king said I was contaminated, that my kind had been eliminated for a reason. How old are you now? Briar closed her eyes. I stopped counting after the 3rd year, but I think 21, maybe 22. She felt him go very still. When he spoke again, his voice was a low growl that made the windows rattle. 6 years. You were chained in darkness for 6 years. It was supposed to be an execution, she whispered. But I wouldn't die. The council tried everything, poison, starvation, wolf's bane. But the light kept healing me. So they decided to wait. Let the darkness eat me slowly. His growl deepened, and she heard something crack, wood splintering beneath his grip on the chair. Why did you come for me? The question escaped before she could stop it. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I felt you dying. Through here. He pressed his fist to his chest. My wolf went mad. I couldn't breathe until I found you. Briar's eyes widened. That's not possible. I'm not wolf blood. I can't be your mate, he said simply. Finality in that single word. The word hung between them like a challenge to fate itself. The council will never accept this, she said. The council will accept what I tell them to accept. You don't understand. Desperation crept into her voice. Lightcasters and wolves are natural enemies. My light can burn through your kind like acid. That's why they eliminated us. That's why. Show me. She blinked. What? Your light. Show me what it does. I could hurt you. His lips quirked, not quite a smile. Little star, you can barely lift your own hand. I think I'll survive. The endearment made her chest ache. Slowly, carefully, she let the light build in her palm. It sparked, silver white, beautiful and terrible. He extended his hand toward it. Don't. His fingers passed through the light. She waited for a scream, for the sizzle of burning flesh. Instead, his eyes went wide with wonder. It's warm. That's not. She stared at their joined hands, her light dancing harmlessly over his skin. You should be in agony. The only agony, he said quietly, was feeling you die while I sat on that throne playing king. Before she could respond, the door burst open. A guard rushed in, face pale with panic. Your Majesty, the council demands your presence. They're calling for the girl's immediate execution. Kael stood slowly, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Is that so? His voice was soft.
Deadly.
They say she's an abomination. That her presence here will curse the kingdom. They've invoked the old law. Briar's heart stopped. The old law allowed the council to override even the king in matters of species purity. Kael looked back at her, and his eyes held a promise that made her breath catch. Then I'll invoke an older law. He turned to the guard. Tell the council I'm bringing my mate to the throne room. And if anyone so much as looks at her wrong, I'll paint the walls with their blood. The guard fled. What older law? Briar whispered. But Kael was already lifting her from the bed, cradling her against his chest. The law of true mates, he said. They can't execute you if you're claimed. Her blood went cold. Claimed means marked. Bonded. Mine in every way that matters. His eyes blazed gold. The question is whether you trust me enough to try. Briar looked at this man, this king who'd abandoned his coronation to find her, who'd torn through iron with his bare hands, whose touch made her light dance instead of destroy. I trust you, she whispered. Then hold on to me, little star, because we're about to start a war. The throne room erupted the moment Kael carried Briar through the doors. Abomination. She'll curse us all. Kill it before it spreads its poison. Kael's growl silenced them all. He walked through the crowd of nobles and counselors, each step deliberate, his arms never wavering despite Briar's trembling. Don't look at them, he murmured against her hair. Look at me. She lifted her head, meeting his golden gaze, and for a moment, the crowd disappeared. Then High Counselor Gavel's voice cut through the silence like a blade. King Kael, while we rejoice in your finding of your mate, surely you can see the impossibility here. This creature is a Lightcaster, the last of her kind, for good reason. Our laws are clear. Your laws, Kael said, settling onto his throne with Briar still in his arms, condemned an innocent girl to 6 years of torture. She is not innocent. Counselor Malwick stepped forward, his scarred face twisted with disgust. He pulled aside his collar, revealing burned scars that looked like lightning strikes. Lightcasters killed dozens of our kind in the old wars. I bear the marks of what her kind can do. And wolves killed thousands of theirs, Kael countered. Yet here she sits, having harmed no one, having spent 6 years in chains for the crime of existing. She cannot be your true mate, Gavel insisted. It's biologically unthinkable. She has no wolf. She cannot shift. She cannot. Cannot what? Kael's voice dropped dangerously. Cannot love? Cannot bond? Cannot bear young? His arms tightened around Briar. Or cannot be controlled by you? The accusation hung heavy in the air. Test her, someone called from the crowd. If she's truly your mate, let her prove it.
How?
Kael demanded. Gavel smiled coldly. The moon trial. Let her touch the sacred stone. If she's truly meant for you, the stone will accept her. If not, he shrugged. It will reveal the truth. Briar felt Kael tense. She didn't know what the sacred stone was, but from his reaction it wasn't good. The sacred stone hasn't been used in a century, he said. Because there hasn't been a questioned mating in a century, Gavel countered. Unless you're afraid of what it will show. Trap. This was clearly a trap. But Kael was already standing. Bring it. The crowd parted as 2 guards carried an obsidian pedestal topped with a sphere that seemed to absorb light. Even from across the room, Briar could feel its power, ancient, hungry, decidedly hostile to her presence. "The stone will burn anything that doesn't belong to the wolf bloodline," Kael announced loud enough for all to hear. "If she is your true mate, it will recognize her through your bond. If not—" "I know what it does," Kael snapped. He looked down at Briar. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "If I don't, they'll never stop." He carried her to the stone, each step heavy with dread. As they drew closer, Briar's skin began to tingle, then burn. The stone didn't just reject her, it actively hated her existence. "Your hand on the stone," Kael instructed, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Briar extended her skeletal hand, watching it tremble. The moment her palm touched the obsidian surface, agony exploded through every nerve. She didn't scream. She'd learned long ago that screaming only made it worse. But her light erupted involuntarily, silver-white energy coursing over her skin in desperate self-defense. The stone began to crack. "Unthinkable," someone breathed. The crack spread, spiderwebbing across the surface, as Briar's light poured into it. She couldn't stop. The stone was pulling her power out, draining her, but also changing. "Look," a young wolf pointed. The obsidian was transforming, black giving way to silver, as if her light was purifying it from within. But the drain was too much. She felt her life force following her light into the stone. This was how she'd die, not in darkness below, but here in the light, proving she didn't belong. Then Kael's hand covered hers on the stone. The moment their skin touched, everything changed. Power rushed through her. Not her own light, but something wild and primitive. Wolf energy meeting her light and merging with it. The stone exploded. Not cracked. Not shattered. Completely obliterated. Silver and gold light erupted from where it had been, filling the throne room with radiance beyond description. When it faded, a new stone had formed from the ashes of the old, neither black nor silver, but a swirling fusion of both, pulsing like a heartbeat. Absolute silence. Then Kael dropped to his knees. "The Genesis Stone," he whispered. "It's the Genesis Stone." "What?" Kael demanded, still holding Briar upright. "Legend says when wolf and light unite in perfect balance, they'll create the Genesis Stone, the original source of both bloodlines." Kael's voice shook. "It hasn't existed since the Great Severing, when our kind split apart." "You're saying—" "I'm saying she's not just your mate, Your Majesty. She's your perfect match, the one prophesied to reunite what was broken." Kael looked up at Briar with something approaching awe. "She's the bridge." Before anyone could respond, Briar's legs gave out. The effort had taken everything. Too much. She gasped, "Used too much." Her light was flickering, fading. She could feel her body beginning to shut down, the years of torture finally collecting their due. "No." Kael's arms tightened around her. "You don't get to leave me now. Not when I just found you." "Can't." Breathing was becoming impossible. "Can't hold on." "Then don't," he said fiercely. "Let go. Trust me to catch you. If I let go, the light will. The light will do what it's meant to do." His forehead pressed to hers. "Stop fighting it, little star. Stop fighting me." Around them, the court watched in stunned silence as their new king held his dying mate, silver light flickering like a candle in the wind. "Please," Kael whispered, and for the first time, Briar heard him break. "Please don't leave me alone in the dark." The words shattered something in her chest. She'd been alone in the dark for 6 years. She knew that agony intimately. With the last of her strength, she pressed her lips to his throat, right where she could feel his pulse racing. "Not alone," she breathed. "Never alone again." Then her light exploded outward one final time, not in death, but in transformation. Silver mixed with gold, light with shadow, human with wolf. When it faded, Briar Nightingale, last of the Lightcasters, was gone. In her place lay something entirely new. Chapter 3. The Harvested Truth. Briar woke to arguing voices and the sensation of floating in liquid starlight. "It's been 3 days." She should have either transformed or died by now. Look at her, Lysander. Does that look like death to you? She tried to open her eyes but found she couldn't. Not because they were closed, but because she was seeing differently. Everything appeared in layers. The physical world, yes, but also streams of energy flowing through everything like rivers of light. Fascinating. The one called Lysander murmured. Her cellular structure is completely rewriting itself. It's neither wolf transformation nor human death. It's evolution. A new voice, female, ancient. The child is becoming what she was always meant to be. Briar felt movement around her, the energy streams shifting as people repositioned. Through her new sight, Kael appeared as a blazing golden sun, his worry manifesting as dark clouds across his luminescence. Elder Morphia, Kael's voice held desperate respect. Can you help her? Help. The Ancient One laughed. Boy, she doesn't need help. She needs understanding. Do you know what you've done by bringing light and wolf together? Created the Genesis Stone, apparently. No. The stone is just a symbol. You've started something that cannot be stopped. A pause. She is the first of something new. And if she survives, she will change everything. If she survives. The words echoed through Briar's consciousness. She tried to speak, to move, but her body wasn't responding to her commands anymore. It was busy doing something else, unmaking and remaking itself cell by cell. Why can't she wake up? Kael's hand found hers, and the touch sent cascades of sensation through her transforming nervous system. Because she's fighting it, Elder Morpheus said. 6 years of suppressing her light, of forcing herself to be less than she is. Her mind doesn't know how to let go. Then tell me how to reach her. You can't. This battle is hers alone. The elder paused. But you can show her what waits on the other side. How? The same way you found her in the first place. Follow the bond. Briar felt Kael's consciousness brush against hers, tentative, uncertain. His thoughts tasted like pine forests and mountain storms. Little star. She tried to respond, but her mental voice was fragmented, scattered across the transformation. I'm scared, she finally managed. I know. His presence wrapped around her like warmth. But you're the bravest person I know. 6 years in darkness, and you never broke. I'm breaking it now. No. His conviction blazed through the bond. You're becoming. She wanted to believe him, but the pain was increasing. Every cell screamed as it died and reformed. Her bones were dissolving, restructuring into something denser. Her muscles tore and rewove themselves with threads of light. Even her heart was changing, its rhythm splitting, creating dual chambers that beat in counterpoint. Let me show you something, Kael whispered through the bond. Suddenly, she was seeing through his eyes, seeing herself on the bed. But it wasn't the skeletal girl he'd pulled from the dungeons. Her body radiated light, so brilliant it should have blinded everyone in the room. But more than that, she was beautiful. Her hair had turned silver white. Her skin gleamed like moonlight. Patterns of light traced beneath her skin like living tattoos. This is what you're becoming, he said. Not a monster. Not an abomination. Something magnificent. What if they're right? What if I am dangerous? Then we'll be dangerous together. His certainty shattered something in her, the last wall she'd built to contain her light. It exploded outward, not in destruction, but in pure creation. Every plant in the room burst into bloom. Wounds healed. Old scars faded. Even Elder Morphia gasped as ancient aches disappeared. By the first moon, Lysander breathed. She's not just transforming. She's transforming everything around her. Briar's violet eyes snapped open, truly open, and the world flooded in with crystalline clarity. She could see everything. Every mote of dust. Every breath. Every heartbeat in the castle. But more than that, she could see the connections between all living things, threads of light binding every soul. Hello, little star, Kael said, and his voice carried harmonics she'd never heard before. She sat up, marveling at how easy movement was now. Her body felt perfect. Not weak, not broken, but absolutely right for the first time in her life. How long? She asked, then stopped. Her voice had changed too, richer, layered with power. 3 days, Lysander said, approaching cautiously. May I examine you? She nodded, watching in fascination as he cast diagnostic spells. Each one hit her and refracted into prismatic light. Incredible. His hands trembled as he worked. Your blood is half light, half something I've never seen. Your bones are reinforced with condensed moonlight. And your heart. He stepped back. You have 2 hearts. 2 hearts. Briar pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the dual rhythm. One for your human side, one for what you've become. Elder Morphia said. You truly are the bridge prophesied. Which means... A bell tolled, deep and ominous. What is that? Briar asked. Kael's face went grim. The council summons. They've called an emergency session. About me? About us. He helped her stand, steadying her when she wobbled on newly strengthened legs. They're going to challenge the mating again. But the Genesis stone proved. Yes. But now they know what you're becoming, and they're terrified. His jaw tightened. Gavel has been spreading fear through the court. Half believe you're our salvation. The other half think you're our doom. Another bell toll, more insistent. What happens if we don't go? They have the authority to exile us both. Kael cupped her face gently. But I need you to understand something. Whatever happens in that room, I will not let them take you from me again, even if it means civil war. Briar searched his eyes, seeing the truth there. He would burn the kingdom down before letting them separate. Then we face them together, she said. But as they prepared to leave, Captain Darius burst through the door, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Your Majesty, the lower chambers. Something's wrong. The other prisoners, the ones kept near where we found the queen, they're changing. The screaming echoed up from the depths like a chorus of the damned. How many? Kael demanded as they ran through the castle corridors, Briar keeping pace despite her still adjusting body. 7 that we've found, Darius gasped. Maybe more. The old dungeons go deeper than we thought. Briar's newly enhanced senses picked up what the others couldn't. Not just screams of pain, but of transformation. The same agony she'd just experienced multiplied. They're Lightcasters, she breathed. They're all Lightcasters. Kael's head snapped toward her. That's not possible. The last Lightcaster died decades ago. That's what they told you, her voice turned bitter, just like they told you the dungeons were empty. They descended the same stairs Kael had taken to find her, but this time, instead of stopping at her former cell, they continued deeper. The air grew thick with power, light magic clashing violently with the darkness. The first cell they reached contained a boy, maybe 13, convulsing on the floor as silver light poured from his eyes. Help him. Briar moved instinctively toward the cell. Don't. Darius grabbed her arm. He attacked 3 guards. His light burns anyone who gets close. Not me, Briar said softly. She pulled free and approached the cell. The boy's light, which had been crackling wildly, suddenly calmed as she drew near. Sister, he whispered in a broken voice. Are you like me? Yes. She reached through the bars. The moment their hands touched, his chaotic light stabilized, flowing into harmony with hers. What's your name? Jax. Tears streamed down his face. They took me when I was 8. Said my parents were dead. Said I was the last. His voice cracked. But there are others. 7 others down here. We could hear each other crying through the stones. Rage built in Briar's chest, not her gentle light, but something fiercer. The Genesis power stirring. Show me the others, she commanded. Over the next hour, they discovered the truth. 8 Lightcaster children and young adults, the oldest perhaps 25, all imprisoned in the deepest dungeons. All told the same story. Family murdered, taken when their light manifested, told they were the last of their kind. Why keep them? Kael's voice was deadly quiet as they stood before the last cell, where a girl barely older than 16 huddled in the corner, her light flickering weakly. Why not just kill them? Elder Morphia, who had followed them down, answered grimly. Because Lightcaster blood is powerful. Harvested correctly, it can enhance a wolf's bane, create weapons, and fuel dark magic.
She paused.
They were being farmed. The girl in the cell whimpered, pressing herself further into the corner. Look at me, Briar said gently. The girl raised her head, revealing violet eyes that shifted to silver when afraid. You're safe now. I promise. That's what they said when they took me, the girl whispered. Right before they killed my mother. Something snapped in Briar. The careful control she'd maintained over her transformation shattered. Light exploded from her. Not gentle healing light, but something ancient and furious. The Genesis power in its raw form. Every lock in the dungeon dissolved. Every chain crumbled to rust. The Lightcaster prisoners stumbled from their cells, drawn to her like moths to flame. Briar, Kael said carefully. She could hear the alarm in his voice, feel his wolf's unease through their bond. They tortured children, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the stone walls tremble. For years, decades. While everyone above lived their lives, these children rotted in darkness. I didn't know, but someone did. She turned to face him, and he took an involuntary step back. Her eyes were pure light now, no iris or pupil visible. Your father knew, the council knew, how many others knew and said nothing. Before he could answer, bells began tolling above, not the measured summons from before, but the rapid clanging of alarm. The council, Darius said, checking the communication crystal at his belt. His face went pale. They've sealed the throne room. They're voting on. He swallowed. They're voting on whether to execute all Lightcasters as threats to the kingdom. Including me? Briar asked, though she already knew the answer. Especially you. They're calling you the corrupted queen. They say your influence caused the Genesis stone, that you're spreading a plague of light through the castle. The young Lightcasters pressed closer to Briar, seeking protection. She could feel their terror, their desperate hope that she could save them when no one else had. Take them somewhere safe, she told Kael. The infirmary. Your private quarters. Anywhere but here. What are you going to do? She met his eyes, and for the first time since her transformation, she let him see the full extent of what she'd become. Not just healed, not just transformed, but reborn as something that could stand against the darkness that had tortured innocence for generations. I'm going to the throne room. Briar, no. If you confront the council now, while your power is unstable. My power isn't unstable, she said quietly. I'm angry. There's a difference. She started toward the stairs, but Kael caught her arm. Through their bond, she felt his fear, not of her, but for her. You could die, he said. I died the moment they put me in chains 6 years ago. Everything since has been resurrected. She touched his face gently, her light-traced fingers leaving brief patterns on his skin. Trust me as I trusted you. He searched her eyes for a long moment, then nodded. Darius, get the young ones to the infirmary. Post our most trusted guards. No one else enters. Yes, your majesty. As the captain began organizing the rescued prisoners, Kael took Briar's hand. If you're going to confront the council, you're not going alone. They'll use you against me. Threaten your throne, your position. Let them try. His eyes blazed gold, his wolf rising to match her light. They want to know what happens when wolf and light unite? Let's show them. Together, they ascended from the dungeons, power crackling between them like lightning. Behind them, 8 young Lightcasters watched with desperate hope. Above them, the council waited with weapons drawn. And somewhere between, the Genesis stone pulsed with anticipation, knowing that the reckoning 6 years in the making was finally at hand. Chapter 4. The Council's Reckoning. The throne room doors were barred from within. Briar simply placed her palm against the ancient wood and pushed. The doors didn't open. They disintegrated, crumbling to ash that swirled around her and Kael like a storm as they entered. The council had formed a defensive circle, wolf's bane-laced weapons drawn. At its center stood Gavel, holding a black crystal that pulsed with malevolent energy. The Void Stone, Elder Morphia gasped from behind them. It consumes light. They must have been saving it. Stand down, Your Majesty, Kael said coldly. This creature has corrupted you. We can still save you if you step aside now. Corrupted? Kael's laugh was dark. She opened my eyes. Do you want to tell him, Kael, or shall I? Briar's voice carried to every corner of the room, rich with layers of power that made several nobles flinch. The High Counselor's jaw tightened. I don't know what lies she's filled your head with. The dungeons, Briar said, each word precise as a blade. 8 children in chains. Tortured. Harvested. For how long, Kael? Murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles. Not all of them, Briar realized, had known. Necessary sacrifices, Kael said. Their blood helped us create weapons against our enemies. Their suffering protected the kingdom. Children, Kael snarled, his wolf surging so close to the surface that his eyes glowed molten gold. You tortured children. Lightcaster children. Abominations, just like her. Kael raised the void stone higher. But we can end this plague now. The stone will consume every trace of light in the kingdom. Including the Genesis stone? Elder Morphia asked sharply. The symbol of unity you celebrated 3 days ago? Kael hesitated, and in that moment, Briar understood. You're afraid, she said, stepping forward. Several guards raised their weapons, but she ignored them. You're terrified that if light and wolf can coexist, if we can create instead of destroy, then everything you've built on hatred becomes meaningless. Silence. Kael activated the void stone. Black tendrils shot toward Briar, seeking her light like hungry serpents. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just let them come. The darkness touched her skin and shattered like glass against steel. Impossible, someone breathed. No, Briar said, her dual hearts beating in perfect rhythm. Inevitable. She raised her hand and light bloomed, not the gentle silver of before, but something new. Silver threaded with gold. Light married to shadow. Genesis power in its truest form. The void stone began to crack. You forget, she continued, walking steadily toward Kael as he backed away. I spent 6 years in absolute darkness. 6 years learning that light doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. Her eyes blazed. Your void doesn't scare me. I've lived in it. The stone shattered, its destruction sending several council members to their knees. Dark energy dissipated harmlessly into the air, neutralized by the Genesis power radiating from Briar. Now, Kael's voice rang out. While we have your attention, let's discuss the children in the dungeons. And the ledgers Captain Darius found in your private study, Kael. The ones detailing exactly how much gold you made selling Lightcaster blood to our enemies. Gasps echoed through the room. Even Kael's supporters stepped away from him, horror and disgust replacing loyalty. Lies, Kael snarled, but his scent had changed. Fear, bitter and acrid. The truth, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Jax, the 13-year-old Lightcaster boy, standing with the other 7 rescued prisoners. They should have been in the infirmary, but they'd come anyway, drawn by the confrontation that would determine their fate. I remember you, Jax said, pointing at Kael with a trembling hand. You were there when they took me. You told my parents I died in the fire. His young voice cracked. Then you sold my blood to the Crimson Pack for their war efforts. And me, a girl named Vesper stepped forward, no more than 16. You harvested my tears for poison. Said they were especially potent when I cried for my mother. One by one, they spoke, their testimonies painting a picture of systematic horror that had been hidden beneath the castle for decades. Nobles who'd known nothing began to weep. Warriors turned away in shame. The court fractured before Briar's eyes. Enough. Kael pulled a blade from his robes, not wolf's bane, but something worse. The metal gleamed sickly green, coated with concentrated Lightcaster blood corrupted by dark magic. He lunged, not for Briar, but for Kael. Time slowed. Briar saw the trajectory, saw her mate's eyes widen, saw death approaching on a poisoned edge. She didn't think so. She simply moved. The blade pierced her chest, sliding between her ribs with surgical precision. But instead of pain, she felt completion. No. Kael's roar shook the castle, primal and agonized. Briar looked down at the blade protruding from her chest, then at Gavel's shocked face. "You missed," she said softly. "I struck your heart. My human heart." She pulled the blade out. No blood followed its exit. The wound sealed instantly, her dual heart system compensating. "But I have another one now. A gift from the transformation you force me to endure." Light exploded from the wound, pure, undiluted Genesis power. It struck Gavel, and for a moment he glowed like a star. Then he began to change. Not dying, transforming. His wolf features softened, shifted, became something between. When the light faded, he stood there looking lost, confused, broken. "What did you do to me?" he whispered. "I gave you what you feared most," Briar replied. "Understanding. You can feel them now, can't you? Every Lightcaster you hurt. Every child you tortured. Their pain is part of you now." Gavel fell to his knees, sobbing. The weight of his crimes crashed over him with his new empathic abilities. Years of agony, fear, and suffering flooding his consciousness all at once. He clutched his head, keening like a wounded animal. Around the room, weapons clattered to the floor. The remaining council members knelt, not in submission, but in awe. "The bridge," Elder Morpheus said into the silence. "She really is the bridge. Not just between light and wolf, but between justice and mercy." Briar swayed, exhaustion finally catching up to her transformed body. Kael caught her immediately, pulling her against his chest. Through their bond, she felt his relief, his pride, and his overwhelming love. "The vote," someone said hesitantly. Counselor Rhiannon, one of the moderates who'd looked horrified during the testimonies. "We still need to vote on the Lightcaster's fate." "No," Kael said firmly, his arms protective around Briar. "We need to vote on something else. On whether to embrace what we're becoming, a united kingdom of wolf and light, or remain prisoners of our past." "And what of him?" Malwick gestured to Gavel, still sobbing on the floor. "What punishment for his crimes?" Briar looked at the broken man, feeling through her new empathic sense the genuine horror and remorse now flooding through him. He would never be free of what he'd done. Every moment for the rest of his life, he would feel his victim's pain. "He's already been sentenced," she said quietly, "to live with what he's done, to feel it." "That's not justice," someone protested. "Isn't it?" Elder Morphea's ancient eyes were sharp. "Death would be mercy. This way, he can spend the rest of his days trying to atone, helping rebuild what he destroyed." The vote, when it came, was nearly unanimous. Only 3 hardliners voted against unity, and even they looked uncertain, swayed by the testimonies they'd heard and the Genesis Stone's presence pulsing in the corner of the room. Even Gavel, through his tears of remorse, raised a shaking hand in favor. "It's done then," Kael said. "The Kingdom of Silver Peak will be the first to formally recognize Lightcasters as citizens with full rights and protections." Cheers erupted, tentative at first, then growing stronger. But Briar barely heard them. Her newly enhanced senses were picking up something else. A disturbance in the energy streams she could now see. Something dark approaching from beyond the castle walls. "Kael," she whispered. He felt it too through their bond, his wolf's hackles rising in instinctive warning. Then the screaming started. A piercing shriek cut through the air, not human, not wolf, but something else entirely. Briar's dual heart stammered as recognition flooded through her. "No," she breathed. "They're supposed to be extinct." "What's supposed to be extinct?" Kael demanded. Another shriek, closer. Then shadows began flowing across the sun, massive wings blocking out the light. Elder Morphea's face went white. "Void Seekers. The shadow predators of ancient times." Her voice cracked. "Someone's awakened them." The first Void Seeker landed in the courtyard visible through the throne room's high windows. A creature of living shadow with wings that absorbed light, eyes of pure darkness, and claws that could tear through both flesh and spirit. It headed straight for where the young Lightcasters were being kept in the infirmary. Briar didn't think. She leaped through the window, 3 stories up, her transformation completing mid-fall. Not into a wolf. She had no wolf form. Instead, she became something else entirely. A being of pure light given form. Wings of silver gold energy spreading from her back. She struck the void seeker moments before it reached Jax, who'd ventured outside. Her light form burned against its shadow flesh. They rolled across the courtyard, locked in combat that was both physical and metaphysical. More void seekers descended, dozens of them, each targeting a Lightcaster with predatory precision. Protect the children. Kael's command rang out as he shifted to his massive wolf form, leaping from the window to defend the young Lightcasters. But the void seekers kept coming. For every one they destroyed, 2 more appeared. The Lightcasters were exhausting themselves, their light dimming with each attack. They were losing. Into the castle. Briar ordered, her voice carrying on waves of power. Everyone inside. As they retreated, Briar saw him, a figure standing on the opposite tower, cloaked in darkness. He raised his hand, and she recognized the gesture, the way shadow flowed from his fingers like water. "Father," she whispered, her human form reasserting itself in shock. King Marcus Nightingale, the man who'd supposedly died when she was 16, stood alive and commanded an army of nightmares. "Hello, daughter." His voice carried on shadows, smooth and cold as a blade. "I've come to correct my mistake." "Your mistake." Rage built in her chest, hot and fierce. "Abandoning me? Letting them imprison me?" "No." He descended from the tower, shadows carrying him like wings. "My mistake was letting you live when your light first manifested. But I was weak then, still believing love mattered more than purity." The truth hit her like a physical blow. "You're the one who turned me in." "I tried to kill you myself first," he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "But your mother intervened. A foolish woman died, protecting you. So I let the wolves take you, thinking their dungeons would finish what I couldn't." "Why?" The word tore from her throat. "Because you're an abomination." He pulled back his hood, revealing eyes of pure void. Light and shadow were never meant to mix. Yet somehow your mother, a pure Lightcaster, bore a child with darkness in her veins. My shadow. Understanding crashed over Briar like ice water.
Her dual nature.
Her ability to survive in darkness. The way she'd transformed differently than pure Lightcasters. It all made sense. "That's why I could destroy the Void Stone," she said. "Why the darkness couldn't consume me. I'm both." "You're neither," Marcus snarled. "You're a corruption of both bloodlines. And your existence allowed this." He gestured at the castle where Wolf and Lightcaster hid together. "This perversion of natural order." "You mean unity?" "I mean weakness." Shadows exploded from him, racing toward her. Briar raised her hands, light blooming to meet darkness. When they collided, Genesis' power erupted, neither light nor shadow, but something beyond both. "That cannot be," Marcus staggered back. "The Genesis power is a myth." "The Genesis power is evolution," Elder Morpheus said, appearing in the courtyard despite the danger. Light and shadow were once one force, separated by fear and hatred. Your daughter is living proof they can be reunited. Then she'll die as proof they should stay apart. Marcus unleashed the full force of a shadow magic, not just void seekers now, but waves of pure darkness that devoured everything they touched. The castle walls began to crumble. The rescued Lightcasters screamed as their light was forcibly drained. Briar felt each attack like physical wounds. Her friend's pain echoed through her enhanced senses. She tried to fight back, but she was one person against an ocean of shadow. "I'm not strong enough," she thought desperately. "Yes, you are," Kael's voice in her mind, fierce and certain. "But you're fighting alone. Stop trying to be either light or shadow. Be both. Be everything."
"I don't know how."
"Then let me show you." She felt him approach, still in wolf form, but somehow more. The Genesis Stone's power had changed him too, she realized. He wasn't just a wolf anymore. He was a wolf touched by light. Together, he said, shifting to human form beside her. She took his hand, and power erupted between them. Not just their individual strengths, but something multiplicative. The mating bond, the Genesis connection, the unity of opposites, all combining into something that made Marcus step back in alarm. That's not possible, her father said. Wolf and light and shadow can't. Briar laughed, power coursing through her veins like liquid starlight. Father, I spent 6 years in a dungeon being told what I can't do. Let me show you what's possible. And for the first time, she reached not just for her light, but for the shadow inheritance he'd cursed her with. For the first time, she embraced both sides of her nature fully. What emerged wasn't light or shadow, but something that made the Void Seekers freeze mid-flight. Something that would change everything. Chapter 5. The Battle of Three Bloodlines. The power that erupted from Briar was unlike anything the kingdom had ever witnessed. Silver light and midnight shadow wove together, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Her wings expanded, no longer pure light, but threaded with darkness that made them somehow more real, more solid. The Void Seekers that had frozen mid-flight began to tremble. What are you doing to them? Marcus demanded, his void eyes widening. I'm not destroying your creatures, father, Briar said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with both light and shadow. I'm claiming them. She reached out with her Genesis power, not to fight the darkness within the Void Seekers, but to understand it, to accept it, to show it that shadow and light could exist in the same space, in the same being, without destroying each other. One by one, the shadow creatures began to transform. Their pure void eyes gained flecks of silver. Their light-devouring wings became translucent, showing glimpses of the energy that sustained them. They were no longer creatures of pure darkness, but something between, shadow touched by light, just as Briar was light touched by shadow. And they answered to her now. No, Marcus snarled, raising both hands to reassert control. You cannot, they are mine. Born of my power, bound to my will. They were born of shadow, Briar interrupted, just as I was. But you taught them only hunger and hate. I'm teaching them something else. The transformed Void Seekers circled around her protectively, then spread out to shield the young Lightcasters huddled near the castle entrance. The creatures that had been hunting them moments ago were now their guardians. Marcus's face contorted with rage. You dare use my own power against me? You dare corrupt what I created? I'm not corrupting anything, Briar said quietly. I'm healing it.
Healing.
Marcus's laugh was bitter and sharp. You understand nothing, child. Shadow is not meant to be healed. It is meant to consume, to purify through destruction. Your mother didn't understand that either, and look where her weakness led. Briar felt Kael, tense beside her, his hand still gripping hers tightly. My mother loved you, Briar said. That's not a weakness. Love made her soft. Made her betray her own kind by lying with a Shadow King. Made her defend an abomination when she should have. Marcus's voice cracked, just slightly. She should have let me do what was necessary. For the first time, Briar saw past his anger to the grief beneath. Her father hadn't just lost his mate. He'd killed her. Or as good as killing her, by forcing her to choose between her daughter and her king. You loved her too, Briar said softly. That's why you can't forgive yourself. Why have you spent years telling yourself I'm an abomination? Because hating me is easier than admitting you destroyed the only thing you ever loved. Silence. Shadows erupted from Marcus like a tidal wave, crashing toward Briar with enough force to level the courtyard. But Kael was there, his wolf surging to the surface. Golden energy blazed around him, amplified by the Genesis bond. He didn't try to stop the shadows. Instead, he channeled them, redirecting the darkness around Briar like water flowing around stone. The shadows crashed into the castle walls, but the Genesis stone inside the throne room pulsed, and the walls held. You think your wolf can protect her from me? Marcus snarled. I am the last Shadow King. I have commanded darkness for longer than you've been alive, boy. Then command this, Kael growled. He pulled Briar closer, and their power merged completely. Not just light and wolf anymore, but light and shadow and wolf. 3 bloodlines that were supposed to be enemies, flowing together like tributaries joining into a river. The Genesis power that resulted was blinding. Every shadow creature Marcus had brought, the dozens of void seekers still under his control, suddenly faltered. Briar could feel their confusion, their hunger warring with a new sensation, hope. The possibility that they could be something other than weapons. Come to me, she called to them, her voice carrying on waves of Genesis energy. You don't have to serve destruction anymore. You can choose differently. One void seeker broke away from Marcus's control. Then another. Then 5 more. They descended around Briar like falling snow, their void eyes reflecting her light, their shadow wings folding in submission. Traitors! Marcus roared. He pulled something from his robes, a dagger that seemed to absorb reality itself. If I cannot have them, neither will you. He drove the blade into his own chest. Father, no. Briar screamed, but it was already done. Marcus's form began to dissolve, shadows pouring from the wound like smoke. But instead of dissipating, the darkness grew, expanding outward in a wave that consumed everything it touched. He's not dying, Elder Morphia gasped from the castle entrance. He's transforming, becoming pure void. The shadow wave crashed over the courtyard. Grass withered. The stone cracked. Even the air itself seemed to thin, as if reality was being drained away. Briar felt it reaching for her, trying to pull her into that absolute emptiness. Her light flared instinctively, but the void was too vast. It would consume her light, and her, and everyone she loved, unless she stopped fighting it. The realization hit her like lightning. She'd been using her shadow inheritance as a weapon, a tool to control other shadows. But that wasn't what shadow was meant for. Shadow wasn't about control, it was about acceptance. About acknowledging that darkness exists, that it has a place, that it serves a purpose. Briar released her light. Kael's shock and fear flooded through their bond, but she sent back reassurance. Trust me. The void wave crashed over her, and she let it. She opened herself to the darkness, accepted it, welcomed it into the spaces between her light. And in doing so, she found the core of what her father had become. He wasn't angry anymore. He was in grief. Pure, absolute, all-consuming grief for everything he'd lost. For the mate who died because of his choices. For the daughter he'd tried to kill. For the love he destroyed with his own hands. I'm sorry, Briar whispered into the darkness. I'm so sorry you've been carrying this alone. The void hesitated. You don't have to be empty anymore, she continued. Let me show you what Mother showed me. That light and shadow can coexist. That love doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole. She poured her light into the void, not to destroy it, but to fill it. To give her father's grief a place to rest instead of consuming everything around it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the void began to contract, drawing back from the courtyard, pulling inward toward the shape that had once been Marcus Nightingale. When the shadows cleared, he stood there once more. No longer the Shadow King wreathed in darkness, but simply a man. His void eyes had changed, gaining the same silver-flecked quality as the transformed Void Seekers. He looked at Briar, and for the first time, she saw recognition in his gaze. Not of an abomination, but of his daughter. You have your mother's mercy, he said, his voice hoarse. I never deserved either of you. No, Briar said. You didn't. But that's not how love works. Marcus's legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees. What have I done, he whispered, staring at his hands. What have I, the children in the dungeons? The years you spent in chains. The darkness I commanded. His voice broke completely. I killed her. Your mother. I killed her for defending you, and then I tried to destroy the only part of her I had left. I know, Briar said simply. How can you? Marcus looked up at her, confusion and anguish warring in his transformed eyes. How can you stand there and not want me dead? Because hate takes more energy than I have left, Briar said. And because someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to choose forgiveness instead of vengeance, or we'll just keep destroying each other forever. She extended her hand to him. Marcus stared at it like it was a weapon. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not, Briar agreed. But I'm giving it anyway. Not for you, for me. Because I refuse to let what you did turn me into what you became. Slowly, trembling, Marcus reached up and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, Genesis' power flared, not explosive this time, but gentle.
Healing.
Years of darkness that had poisoned Marcus began to lift, replaced by something he hadn't felt since before his mate's death.
Hope.
Around the courtyard, the remaining Void Seekers, all of them now, began to transform. No longer creatures of pure shadow, but beings of balanced darkness and light, beautiful in their strangeness. Kael moved to Briar's side, his protective instinct still strong. Can he be trusted? I don't know, Briar said honestly. But I know what it's like to be given a second chance when you don't deserve one. Someone did that for me. She looked at Kael meaningfully. Someone tore through iron doors and wolf's bane chains because he believed I was worth saving. Kael's expression softened, but his hand remained on her shoulder, steadying her as exhaustion finally began to catch up. Elder Morphia approached slowly, her ancient eyes studying Marcus with a mixture of wariness and wonder. The Shadow King, transformed by Genesis' power. The Void Seekers turned to Guardians. The bridge isn't just between bloodlines, it's between what we were and what we could become. It's not enough. A voice called from the castle entrance. Counselor Malwick stood there, his scarred face hard. Behind him, several other nobles gathered, not all of them, but enough to matter. You've shown us unity is possible. You've even proven that shadow can be redeemed. But words and demonstrations aren't enough to change centuries of fear and hatred. What are you suggesting? Kael demanded, his alpha authority making several of the gathered nobles shift uncomfortably. A treaty, Malwick said. Formal, binding, between all three bloodlines. Something that makes this unity not just possible, but permanent.
He paused.
And it needs to be sealed with more than good intentions. Blood oath. Elder Morphia suggested. Marriage. Another voice interjected. Everyone turned to see Jax, the young Lightcaster boy, standing with the other rescued children. In the old stories, before the Great Severing, alliances were sealed with marriages, with families joining together so their descendants would have reasons to keep the peace. Briar felt Kael's shock through their bond, followed quickly by understanding. We're already mated, Kael said carefully. Already bonded by the Genesis Stone. A private bonding, Malwick countered. What we need is a public declaration. A ceremony that all three bloodlines can witness and recognize. He met Kael's eyes steadily. A wedding that proves unity isn't just philosophy, it's family. Silence fell over the courtyard. Briar should have been terrified. She'd been free from her chains for less than a week. She'd barely processed her transformation, barely begun to understand her powers. The idea of standing before the entire kingdom, exposed and vulnerable, should have sent her back into that defensive shell she'd built in the darkness. But when she looked at Kael, at this man who'd abandoned his coronation to find her, who'd fought beside her against councils and shadow armies, who'd shown her that strength and gentleness could coexist, she didn't feel fear. She felt certain. 3 months, she said. Give us 3 months to prepare. To let the kingdom adjust to these changes. To let the young Lightcasters heal and the transformed Void Seekers learn what it means to choose light instead of just serving darkness. And give me time to earn back even a fraction of the trust one destroyed, Marcus added quietly. If my daughter is to marry, I would like to stand beside her not as the monster who imprisoned her, but as the father who failed her and is trying to do better. Malwick considered this, then nodded slowly. 3 months. But in that time, I want to see real change. Lightcasters integrated into court positions. Void Seekers trained as guardians instead of weapons. And you, he pointed at Marcus. You work with the children you indirectly harmed. Let them decide if redemption is even possible for someone like you. Agreed, Marcus said without hesitation. Then we have a treaty, Kael declared. Wolf, light, and shadow, united under one banner, sealed by one bond. 3 months from now, at the next full moon, Briar Nightingale will become Queen of Silver Peak, and the Genesis Bridge will be complete. Cheers erupted from those gathered, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Not everyone cheered. Some still looked uncertain, even afraid. But it was a beginning. As the crowd dispersed to spread the news, Briar finally allowed herself to lean fully against Kael, her energy completely spent. You know this means you're stuck with me, she murmured against his chest. No taking it back once we make it official. Little star, he said, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. I've been stuck with you since the moment I felt you dying in that dungeon. Everything since has just been made official. He kissed her then, not their first kiss, but somehow the most important. A promise sealed with lips and breath, and the Genesis power that sparked between them. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver. Light and shadow dancing together, just as they were always meant to. 3 months would pass quickly. There would be challenges ahead. Resistance from those who clung to old hatreds, growing pains as 3 bloodlines learned to coexist, and the constant work of proving that unity was worth fighting for. But for now, in this moment, Briar allowed herself to simply rest in the arms of her mate and believe in the impossible. Chapter 6: The Shadow Father's Penance. The first week after the battle was chaos. Briar watched from the castle's highest balcony as workers repaired the courtyard walls, as Lightcaster children hesitantly explored their new freedom, as transformed Void Seekers perched on rooftops like strange gargoyles, no longer hunting, but watching. Guarding. You should be resting, Kael said, appearing behind her with the silence of a predator. Even after everything, his wolf nature made him move like smoke through shadows. I've been resting for 6 years, Briar replied, not turning from the view. I think I've had enough of dark rooms and stillness. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Through their bond, she felt his constant worry. Not that she was dangerous, but that she was fragile. That the transformation had taken more from her than she'd admit. He wasn't entirely wrong. Elder Morpheus says your dual hearts are still adjusting, Kael murmured against her hair. That pushing yourself too hard could. Could what? Make me collapse again. Briar turned in his arms. I collapsed because I channeled enough Genesis power to transform an army of shadow creatures and redeem the Shadow King. I think I earned that exhaustion. You did, he agreed. But you're doing it again. I can feel it through the bond. You're burning through your energy faster than you're replenishing it. Briar wanted to argue, but her newly heightened awareness betrayed her. He was right. Her light flickered inconsistently, her shadow inheritance felt raw and uncontrolled, and her dual hearts sometimes fell out of rhythm when she wasn't paying attention. There's too much to do, she said instead. The young Lightcasters need training. The Void Seekers need guidance. The Council needs reassurance that I'm not going to accidentally destroy the castle. And Marcus, she stopped. Your father, Kael said carefully, has been asking to see you. I know. Briar had felt his presence in the castle, a constant shadow at the edge of her awareness. I'm not ready. He's been working with the children, Kael said. Teaching them control techniques he learned as Shadow King. Helping them understand the darkness they're afraid of. That doesn't erase what he did. No, Kael agreed. But it's a start. And Jax asked me to tell you something. He said your father cried when he learned what Gavel had done. Said Marcus spent an hour on his knees apologizing to each child individually. Briar closed her eyes. She didn't want to feel sympathy for the man who'd tried to kill her. Didn't want to acknowledge that pain and remorse in his transformed eyes. But she did. I'll see him, she said finally. But not alone. You stay with me. Always, Kael promised. They found Marcus in the old training hall, surrounded by 6 of the young Lightcasters. Jax was there, along with Vesper, and 4 others Briar had learned were named Rhea, Talia, Cora, and Linnea. Marcus stood in the center of a circle of light, shadows swirling around his feet. But unlike before, the shadows didn't feel threatening. They felt teaching. "Watch," he was saying to Jax. "Shadow isn't your enemy. It's the absence of light, yes, but absence doesn't mean evil. It means rest, stillness, the space between heartbeats where you gather strength for the next pulse." He demonstrated, letting shadow flow up his arm and then dissolve harmlessly. Jax mimicked the movement, his light dimming slightly, not extinguishing, but banking like coals waiting to reignite. "Good," Marcus said. "Now, Vesper, your turn. Remember, you're not trying to destroy the shadow. You're learning to coexist with it." Vesper bit her lip, concentration evident on her young face. Her light flickered uncertainly as she tried to dim it without fear. The shadow that crept in wasn't Marcus's. It was natural darkness, the kind that existed in every corner not touched by direct illumination. "I can't," she said, frustration cracking her voice. "Every time I let the light fade, I remember." She stopped, trembling. "The dungeons," Marcus said softly. "I know. The darkness they forced on you wasn't natural. It was a punishment. Torture." He knelt before her, his transformed eyes level with hers. "I helped create that darkness. I taught your captors how to weaponize shadow against light, and I will carry that shame until my last breath. Then why should I trust you?" Vesper's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "You shouldn't," Marcus said bluntly. "But trust and learning aren't the same thing. You don't have to forgive me to benefit from what I know. Use me if that's what it takes. Let me teach you, so that darkness can never control you again." Vesper stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Show me again." Marcus's relief was palpable, though he hid it quickly. He stood and repeated the demonstration, his movements patient and precise. It was Jax who noticed Briar first. Queen Briar. He abandoned the exercise immediately, running toward her with the uncomplicated joy of a child who'd found hope after years of despair. The other children followed, all except Vesper, who watched warily, surrounding Briar with excited chatter about their progress, their new rooms, the food they'd eaten, the sky they could finally see. Through it all, Marcus remained where he was, standing in the center of the training circle, waiting. Briar met his eyes across the room, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. He saw her. She saw him. And both of them were trying to become something better than what they'd been. "Continue your practice," Briar told the children gently. "I need to speak with Marcus. Alone." Kael tensed beside her, but she squeezed his hand. "Wait outside. Please." He didn't like it. She felt his reluctance through their bond, but he respected her choice. With a warning glare at Marcus that promised violence if anything went wrong, Kael ushered the young Lightcasters from the training hall. Silence felt like a weight. "You look well," Marcus said finally, his voice rusty with disuse. "The transformation suits you. You have your mother's grace when you move now." "Don't," Briar said sharply. "Don't talk about her like you have the right." Marcus flinched, but didn't argue. "You're correct. I forfeited that right when he stopped, unable to finish. When you killed her," Briar finished for him. "Or stood by while others did. Which was it, father? Did you strike the blow yourself, or just let it happen?" "I wasn't there when she died," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "I was already gone, already serving the Shadow Court in the Northern Wastes. I learned of her death in a letter from Gavel, actually. He was the one who informed me that my mate had been executed for treason against the Wolf Kingdom, for harboring an abomination." "Me," Briar said. "For protecting me." "Yes." Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. "And do you know what I did when I read that letter? I thanked him. I told him the kingdom was better off without light-touched corruption. I convinced myself she'd betrayed our kind by bearing you, that her death was justice." "But you didn't believe it," Briar said, watching his face carefully with her enhanced senses. Not really. That's why you tried to kill me yourself, isn't it? Because if I died, you could pretend it was all my fault. That she died protecting a monster instead of protecting your daughter. Marcus's composure cracked. I hated you, he whispered. For 16 years, I hated you. Every report I received about the light-touched child growing in the Wolf Kingdom, I prayed you would die. That sickness or accident or just bad luck would take you, so I wouldn't have to face what your existence meant. That you loved her, Briar said. That she loved you. That you destroyed something real and beautiful because you were too afraid to be anything other than what your bloodline expected. Yes, Marcus said simply. And when you manifested at 16, when your light became undeniable, I saw my chance. I told Gavel where to find you. Told him how to bind you with a wolf's bane and shadow curse so your light couldn't heal you quickly. I wanted you to suffer as I had suffered. I did suffer, Briar said, her voice steady despite the pain blooming in her chest. For 6 years, I suffered. And you know what I thought about, Father? Not revenge. Not hatred. I thought about her, about my mother. About the stories she told me before you had her killed. About how light and shadow used to dance together before fear drove them apart. Marcus's face crumpled. She told you the old stories? Every night, Briar said. She told me about the first age, when shadow wasn't evil and light wasn't pure. When they were just two sides of the same power. She told me that someday, someone would remember how to bring them back together. Her voice softened. She told me it might be me. She always believed in prophecies, Marcus said, his voice thick. I always thought love could conquer anything. I called her naive. She was right, though, wasn't she? Briar gestured to herself, to her silver threaded with shadow wings that flickered in and out of visibility, to her eyes that shifted between violet and sterling silver. I am what she said I'd be. The bridge. You're so much more than that, Marcus said. You're everything she hoped for, and everything I was too broken to see. And he stopped struggling. I don't know how to be your father now. I don't know how to look at you without seeing everything I destroyed. Then don't look at me as your daughter, Briar said. Look at me as someone who survived what you did and chose to become something better than the sum of her scars. Marcus's transformed eyes searched hers. Can you teach me that? How can I survive what I've done? I don't know, Briar said honestly. But Vesper was right to question whether you can be trusted. So here's what I'll offer. You can stay in this kingdom. You can teach the young ones. You can work toward redemption. But you're not my father, not yet. You're Marcus, the Shadow King who chose transformation. If you want to be more than that, you have to earn it.
How?
Marcus asked, desperate. Tell me how and I'll do it. Stop trying to earn my forgiveness, Briar said. Start earning your own. Figure out how to live with what you've done. How to wake up every morning knowing you killed the woman you loved and tortured the daughter she died to protect. If you can find a way to survive that truth, really survive it, not just exist through it, then maybe we can talk about what comes next. It was harsh, perhaps crueler than necessary. But Briar had learned in those 6 years of darkness that false comfort only delayed healing. Real growth requires facing truth without flinching. Marcus stood there for a long moment, processing her words. Then slowly he nodded. I'll try, he said. Though I don't know if I'm strong enough. Neither did I, Briar replied. But I had something you don't.
What?
People who believed I was worth saving. She turned toward the door, where Kael waited. Find people who believe that about you, Marcus. Not because of who you were, but because of who you're trying to become. Then maybe you'll start believing it yourself. She left him standing in the training circle, surrounded by shadows that no longer knew whether to obey or abandon him. Outside, Kael pulled her into his arms immediately. How do you feel? Exhausted, Briar admitted.
Angry. Sad.
Hopeful. She laughed weakly. I don't know. Too many things at once. That's allowed, Kael said, stroking her hair. You don't have to have it all figured out. 3 months, Briar murmured. 3 months until we stand before the kingdom and make this permanent. Do you think we're ready? No, Kael said honestly. But I don't think readiness is the point. The point is choosing to try anyway. Through their bond, Briar felt his certainty. Not that everything would be perfect, but that they would face whatever came together. It would have to be enough. Because in 3 months, the Genesis Bridge would be complete. And whatever came after, whatever new challenges arose from uniting 3 bloodlines that had spent centuries at war, they would face it as one. As the sun set over Silver Peak Castle, Briar stood in her mate's arms and watched shadows dance with light across the courtyard. The Void Seekers had settled on the walls like strange sentinels. The young Lightcasters laughed in the gardens. And somewhere inside, Marcus was learning what it meant to choose redemption over despair. The kingdom was transforming just as she had. And for the first time since her imprisonment began, Briar allowed herself to believe that transformation might actually lead somewhere worth going. Chapter 7. The Wedding of 3 Bloodlines. 3 months passed like water through cupped hands, too fast and never fast enough. Briar stood in her chambers, staring at her reflection in a mirror that had been specially crafted to show both light and shadow without distortion. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the skeletal girl Kael had carried from the dungeons. Her silver-white hair had been woven with threads of shadow and gold, a living representation of the 3 bloodlines she now embodied. The wedding gown itself was a masterpiece, white silk that shimmered with embedded light crystals, trimmed with dark wolf fur at the shoulders and hem, and embroidered with shadow thread patterns that moved when she breathed. She looked like a queen. She felt like an imposter. "Stop that," Vesper said from behind her. The young Lightcaster had appointed herself Briar's handmaiden for the day, refusing to take no for an answer. "I can literally see your light dimming when you think bad thoughts." "I'm not thinking bad thoughts," Briar protested. "I'm thinking realistic thoughts." "Same thing in your case." Vesper adjusted one of the light crystals woven into Briar's hair. "You saved us. You transformed an army of shadow monsters. You redeemed the Shadow King. If anyone has earned the right to wear that dress, it's you." "The Shadow King is still a work in progress," Briar muttered. It was true. Marcus had kept his word over the past 3 months, working tirelessly with the young Lightcasters and helping integrate the transformed Void Seekers into castle life. But progress wasn't the same as redemption, and trust wasn't the same as forgiveness. Still, when Jax had asked if Marcus could attend the wedding, Briar hadn't said no. "He's waiting outside," Elder Morphia said, entering the chamber with the authority of someone who'd witnessed centuries of history. "Asked if he could speak with you before the ceremony." Briar's dual hearts stuttered out of rhythm.
"Now."
"Traditionally for fathers to see their daughters before they're given away," Morphia said with a knowing smile. "Though in this case, I don't think anyone's being given anywhere. You're walking that aisle of your own power." Still, Briar found herself saying, "Send him in." Vesper squeezed her hand once, then retreated with Elder Morphia, leaving Briar alone with her reflection and her racing thoughts. Marcus entered slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter something fragile. He'd transformed over the past 3 months too, not physically, but in demeanor. The arrogant Shadow King had been replaced by something quieter, humbler, broken in a way that was beginning to heal. "You look like her," he said softly, stopping several feet away. "Your mother wore white at our bonding ceremony. Said it was tradition for Lightcasters to marry in the color of pure light." His transformed eyes grew distant. She was so beautiful it hurt to look at her. "Is that why you've come?" Briar asked, not unkindly. "To talk about her?" "No," Marcus said. "I came to give you something. If you'll accept it." He pulled a small box from his pocket, simple wood unadorned. When he opened it, Briar's breath caught. Inside lay a pendant on a delicate chain. The stone was unlike anything she'd seen. It swirled with both light and shadow, never settling on one or the other. A perfect marriage of opposites. "This was your mother's," Marcus said. "She wore it the day we bonded. Said it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations of Lightcaster women who dared to love outside their bloodline." He stared at the pendant. "She gave it to me before she died. Made me promise that if you survived, if you found love, I would give this to you." Briar felt tears threatening. She knew, even then, she knew I might. She knew you had light and shadow in your blood. Marcus interrupted gently. Knew you'd need to learn to balance both. And she knew, his voice cracked. She knew I would fail you. Fail her. So she made provisions. Left instructions with people she trusted. Elder Morphia, Briar guessed. Marcus nodded. And others. Your mother was many things, but foolish wasn't one of them. She knew exactly what kind of man I was, what kind of coward, and she loved me anyway. I tried to make myself better. He looked up at Briar. I couldn't be better for her. But maybe I can try to be better for you. Briar took the box carefully, lifting the pendant to watch light and shadow dance through its depths. This doesn't fix anything, she said. I know. And I'm not ready to call you father. I know that too. But, Briar continued, I'm willing to let you try. To keep trying. To see if redemption is possible for someone who's done what you've done. Marcus's relief was palpable. That's more than I deserve. Yes, Briar agreed. It is. So don't waste it. She turned her back to him, lifting her hair. Help me put it on? His hands shook as he fastened the chain around her neck. The pendant settled against her chest, right between her dual hearts, and immediately she felt a warmth spread through her. Not just physical, but emotional, spiritual. Her mother's love, preserved in stone and metal, waiting for this moment. Thank you, Briar whispered. Marcus's hands lingered on her shoulders for just a moment before he stepped back. She would be so proud of you, of what you've become, what you're building here. I hope so, Briar said. Then, softer. I hope you can be proud of me too. Someday. I already am, Marcus said. Even if I have no right to be. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kael's voice came through, tight with barely controlled impatience. If I have to wait one more minute to see my mate, I'm breaking down this door. Briar laughed despite herself. You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. It's bad luck. We've already had all the bad luck we can handle, Kael replied. I think we're safe. Go, Marcus said, moving toward a side door. I'll take my seat with the others. And Briar? He paused. Your mother always said that love was the bravest thing anyone could choose.
I didn't understand that then.
I think I'm beginning now. He left before she could respond, leaving her alone with the pendant warming against her skin, and her mate growing increasingly impatient outside the door. You can come in, she called. Kael entered like a storm barely contained, all coiled power and golden eyes that blazed when they landed on her. He dressed in traditional alpha regalia, black leather and wolf fur, with gold thread embroidered in patterns that matched the ones on her gown. He looked magnificent and wild and completely hers. You're not supposed to be here, she said, but she was smiling. I don't care about supposed to, Kael replied, crossing the room in 3 long strides. I needed to see you. To make sure he stopped, taking in her appearance fully. By the first moon, you're beautiful. You clean up well yourself, Briar said, reaching up to adjust his collar even though it didn't need adjusting. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Through their bond, Briar felt everything he couldn't put into words, his love, his pride, his absolute certainty that this was right. And underneath it all, a thread of fear that she might change her mind. I'm not going anywhere, she said, answering the unspoken worry. You're stuck with me, remember? Good, Kael said fiercely. Because I wasn't planning on letting you go. He touched the pendant at her throat. What's this? My mother's, Briar said. Marcus gave it to me. She wanted me to have it when I found love. Kael's expression softened. She knew you would. Even when you were locked in darkness, she believed you'd find light again. I found more than light, Briar said, pressing her hand over his heart. I found you. I found myself. Found a kingdom that's learning to be more than the sum of its fears. Is that what today is about?
Kael asked.
Proving we can be more? No, Briar said. Today is about choosing love when everything in our history says we should choose hate. It's about standing before everyone who doubted us and saying we believe in something better. Then let's go prove them right, Kael said. The ceremony took place in the castle's grand courtyard, where the Genesis stone had been moved to serve as the altar. Nearly 3,000 witnesses had gathered, wolves from every territory, Lightcasters who'd emerged from hiding when word of Briar's transformation spread, and even a delegation of shadow-touched beings from the northern wastes, come to see if the impossible was truly happening. The transformed Void Seekers perched on every available surface, their presence no longer threatening but strangely comforting. Guardians of the New Age. Briar walked down the aisle alone. She'd insisted on that. This wasn't about being given away from one man to another. This was about choosing, actively and publicly, to join her life with Kael's. The young Lightcasters lined the aisle, their lights creating a path of illumination. Opposite them, wolf warriors held torches that burned with golden flame. And scattered throughout, the Shadow Touch stood in reverent silence, representing a bloodline that had been excluded for too long. At the altar, Kael waited beside Elder Morphia, who would officiate. And to Briar's surprise, standing on the other side was Marcus, not as her father, but as the Shadow King, representing his bloodline in this union of three. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. "We gather today," Elder Morphia began, her ancient voice carrying across the courtyard, "to witness what should be impossible. The union of light and wolf, blessed by shadow, sealed by the Genesis stone itself." She turned to Briar and Kael. "For centuries, our bloodlines have been enemies. We've killed each other over differences we claimed were fundamental, insurmountable, and perhaps for time they were. But evolution isn't about staying the same. It's about becoming more than what we were. These two standing before us aren't just wolf and light. They're living proof that we can choose transformation over tradition." Elder Morphia gestured to the Genesis stone, which pulsed with anticipation. This stone was born when they first touched, when they chose each other despite every logical reason not to. It represents not the death of our individual bloodlines, but their rebirth into something greater. She looked at Kael. "Do you, Kael Stormborn, Alpha King of Silver Peak, choose this woman as your mate, your queen, and your partner in building a kingdom where all bloodlines can coexist?" "I do," Kael said, his voice strong and certain. "I choose her today, tomorrow, and every day after. In light and in shadow, in strength and in weakness, I choose Briar Nightingale." Elder Morphia turned to Briar. "And do you, Briar Nightingale, the Genesis Bridge, choose this man as your mate, your king, and your partner in transformation?" Briar looked at Kael, at this man who'd torn through iron doors to save her, who'd stood beside her against councils and shadow armies, who'd shown her that love didn't have to be gentle to be real. "I do," she said. "I choose you, Kael Stormborn. I choose the kingdom we're building together. I choose hope over fear, unity over division, and love over everything else." "Then place your hands on the Genesis stone," Elder Morphia instructed. Briar and Kael moved together, their hands meeting on the swirling surface of the stone. The moment they touched it, power erupted, silver and gold and shadow, all three bloodlines merging in a display that made the crowd gasp. The stone didn't just pulse this time. It sang, a harmonic that resonated with every living thing in the courtyard. Briar felt it connecting her not just to Kael, but to everyone present. To the young Lightcasters and the old wolves. To the transformed Void Seekers and the Shadow Touch delegation. Even to Marcus, standing witness to something he'd once tried to destroy. They were all part of this now. All connected by the choice to believe in something better. By the power of the Genesis stone, Elder Morphia declared, and before these witnesses of three bloodlines, I declare Kael and Briar bonded, not just as mates, but as the living promise that evolution is always possible. The crowd erupted in cheers, not universal, but loud enough to shake the stones. Kael pulled Briar into his arms and kissed her, and the Genesis stone's light exploded outward in waves that washed over everyone present. Where the light touched, small changes occurred. Ancient grudges felt less important. Old fears seemed manageable. The divisions between bloodlines blurred just slightly, making it easier to see the person instead of the category. It wasn't magic that would solve everything, but it was a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Briar looked out at the crowd and saw her new kingdom, messy, complicated, still figuring itself out, but trying. Actually, trying to be better. Ready for this? Kael murmured against her ear. No, Briar admitted. But I'm choosing it anyway. That's my queen, Kael said with fierce pride. Together, they turned to face their people, wolf and light and shadow, united under one banner. The Genesis Bridge was complete. Now came the harder part, proving it could hold. Chapter 8. The Dawn of Genesis. The celebration lasted until dawn. Briar had never experienced anything like it. The Great Hall transformed into a space where three bloodlines mingled freely, where wine flowed alongside laughter, where old enemies tentatively shared stories that revealed their similarities rather than their differences. Jax had convinced a wolf pup named Tiernan to demonstrate shifting techniques, and now half a dozen Lightcaster children watched in fascination as the young wolf transformed back and forth, showing them the magic they'd only heard about in frightening stories. The transformed Void Seekers had settled on the hall's high rafters, their presence no longer menacing but strangely protective. Briar caught one of them. She'd learned his name was Soren, watching over Vesper with what could only be described as paternal concern. Even the Shadow Touch delegation had relaxed, their initial wariness giving way to cautious optimism. Their leader, a woman named Calypso with eyes that shifted between gray and black, approached Briar as the night wore on. Your Majesty, Calypso said, bowing with a grace that suggested centuries of practice. The Northern Wastes have watched your transformation with great interest. We wondered if the Genesis Bridge was propaganda or reality. And your conclusion? Briar asked, curious despite her exhaustion. That it's both, Calypso said with a slight smile. Reality wrapped in hope, which is the most powerful propaganda of all. She paused. The Shadow King, Marcus, sent word months ago that something impossible was happening here, that his daughter had survived his attempts to destroy her and become something that threatened everything we thought we knew about bloodline separation. Threatened? Kael appeared at Briar's side, his protective instinct always close to the surface. In the best possible way, Calypso assured him. The Northern Wastes have isolated themselves for generations, believing that shadow and light could never coexist. That attempting unity would only lead to corruption and destruction. She looked directly at Briar. You've proven us wrong. The question now is what we do with that proof. You could stay, Briar offered. Not forever, but long enough to see how this works. To learn if what we're building here could work in the Wastes too. Calypso considered this. You'd welcome Shadow Touched permanently? Even knowing our history? What have we done? I spent 6 years in chains being told I was an abomination, Briar said quietly. I learned that history doesn't have to determine destiny. That what we've done matters less than what we choose to do next. She extended her hand. So yes, you're welcome here. All of you. The Shadow Touch leader stared at Briar's hand for a long moment, then took it. Where their skin touched, Genesis power sparked. Gentle this time, not explosive, but undeniably present. We'll stay, Calypso said. 3 months to start. To observe and learn. And if what you're building here proves sustainable. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her severe features. Perhaps the Wastes don't need to remain isolated forever. As Calypso returned to her delegation, Kael pulled Briar close. You're exhausted. I can feel it through the bond. I'm fine, Briar protested, but even as she spoke, her dual hearts stuttered out of rhythm again. You're pushing too hard, Kael said. Trying to be everything to everyone. The bridge between bloodlines, the hope for the future, the symbol of transformation. It's too much weight for one person to carry. I'm not just one person anymore, Briar said. You're still recovering from 6 years of torture, Kael interrupted gently but firmly. Still learning to control powers that shouldn't exist. Still processing trauma that would break most people. You're allowed to rest, Briar. You're allowed to be human, even if you're also something more. Through their bond, she felt his concern, deep and genuine and completely unselfish. He wasn't trying to control her or diminish her. He was trying to protect her from herself. One more hour, Briar compromised. Then we can slip away. Kael's eyes gleamed with approval and something warmer. I'm holding you to that. The hour passed in a blur of well wishes and political promises. Noble after noble approached to pledge loyalty, to express hope, to ask questions about how the integration would work. Briar answered what she could, deflected what she couldn't, and tried to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. She was mid-conversation with a wolf lord from the Eastern Territories when Marcus approached. The crowd around them immediately tensed, conversations dying as everyone watched to see how the Genesis Queen would react to the Shadow King. Your Majesty, Marcus said formally, bowing lower than protocol required. Might I have a word? Briar felt Kael's protective instinct flare through their bond, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. Of course. They moved to a quieter corner of the hall, though Briar was aware of dozens of eyes tracking their movement. Privacy in a royal court was always an illusion. I wanted to thank you, Marcus said once they had relative privacy, for allowing me to stand as Shadow's representative during the ceremony, for not excluding our bloodline from this new beginning. You're trying to atone, Briar said. Excluding you would have undermined that. Perhaps, Marcus agreed. But you could have represented Shadow yourself. You carry that bloodline too. You didn't need me there. No, Briar said. But the young ones did. Jax especially. He told me that having you there, seeing you stand beside Elder Morphia, representing a bloodline instead of just representing your crimes, it gave him hope that people can change. Those mistakes don't have to define us forever. Marcus's transformed eyes grew bright with emotion he struggled to contain. I don't deserve his hope. Probably not, Briar agreed. But he's choosing to give it anyway. Just like I'm choosing to give you another chance. Don't make us regret it. I won't, Marcus promised. Then, quieter. Your mother would be proud of what you've built here, of who you've become. I hope so, Briar said. She touched the pendant at her throat, the one her mother had left for her. I wish she could have seen this. Seeing that her dream of unity wasn't impossible. She sees, Marcus said with unexpected certainty. Light doesn't truly die, Briar. It just transforms. She's part of every luminescent thing in this kingdom now. Part of the Genesis Stone. Part of you. He paused. Part of me, too, I think. The light I tried to destroy, but couldn't quite extinguish. Before Briar could respond, a commotion erupted near the hall's entrance. Captain Darius burst through the crowd, his face pale with alarm. Your Majesties, he said, breathing hard. We have a situation. The outer walls, something's happening. Kael was moving before Darius finished speaking, his wolf surging to the surface. Briar followed, her exhaustion forgotten as adrenaline flooded her system. They raced through the castle corridors, emerging onto the battlements to find guards staring in shocked silence at the horizon. Light was blooming across the landscape. Not the light of sunrise. It was still an hour before dawn. This was something else. Pillars of luminescence erupting from the ground in dozens of locations, stretching skyward like fingers reaching for the stars. What is that? Kael demanded. Elder Morphia appeared beside them, moving with surprising speed for her age. She stared at the lights, and slowly, a smile spread across her ancient face. It's awakening, she breathed. The Genesis Bridge isn't just between people, it's between the land itself and the power that flows through it. You've reawakened something that's been dormant since the Great Severing. Is it dangerous? Briar asked, even as she felt the lights calling to her Genesis power, resonating with it. Dangerous?
No.
Transformative? Absolutely. Morphia gestured to the pillars of light. These are the old places, sites where light and shadow and wolf used to gather together before fear drove them apart. The land itself is responding to what you've done, to the choice you made to unify instead of divide. As they watched, the pillars of light began to spread, their glow touching forests and fields and villages. And wherever the light touched, small changes occurred. A withered tree suddenly bloomed. A dried riverbed began to flow with water. Stones that had been dead and gray took on hints of color, silver and gold and shadow all at once. "The kingdom is healing," Marcus said from behind them. He'd followed them to the battlements, along with Calypso and several other witnesses. Not just the people, the land itself. "That's impossible," Kael said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We keep using that word," Briar said softly. "Impossible. But maybe it's time we accept that impossible just means no one's tried it yet." She raised her hands, and Genesis power flowed from her, not forced, but natural as breathing. It connected with the pillars of light across the landscape, amplifying them, spreading them further. Through her enhanced senses, Briar felt the kingdom responding, felt old wounds in the earth beginning to close, felt places scarred by centuries of warfare starting to remember what peace looked like. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "This is what the prophecy meant," Elder Morpheus said quietly. The Genesis Bridge wasn't just about people learning to coexist. It was about remembering that everything, land, power, life itself, is connected. That separation was always an illusion we maintained through fear. "So, what happens now?"
Kael asked.
Briar lowered her hands, the Genesis power settling back into her dual hearts. The pillars of light remained, steady and strong, no longer requiring her direct connection to sustain them. "Now," she said, "we learn to live with what we've created. We teach the young ones that unity isn't just about tolerating differences, it's about celebrating them. We show the old ones that change doesn't mean losing who they are." She turned to face the assembled witnesses on the battlements, wolves and lightcasters and shadow-touched, all staring at her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "And we prove," Briar continued, her voice carrying with Genesis power, "that love isn't weakness. That choosing compassion over cruelty, forgiveness over vengeance, unity over division, these aren't soft choices. They're the bravest choices anyone can make." The sun began to rise, natural light joining the Genesis pillars to paint the sky in shades of gold and silver and shadow gray. Beautiful beyond description. Kael took Briar's hand, their bond pulsing with shared purpose. "Together," he said simply. "Together," Briar agreed. The kingdom of Silver Peak had transformed overnight, not just politically, but fundamentally. The land itself had chosen evolution over stagnation. There would be challenges ahead. Resistance from those who clung to old fears. Growing pains as three bloodlines learned to function as one. Mistakes and setbacks and moments of doubt. But standing on those battlements, watching light dance with shadow across a healing kingdom, Briar allowed herself to believe in the impossible once more. She'd survived 6 years in darkness and emerged as something new. She'd taken a mate who should have been her enemy and created a bond that birthed miracles. She'd faced her father's betrayal and chosen forgiveness over hate. If she could do all that, then maybe, just maybe, a kingdom could learn to do the same. "Your Majesty," Vesper's voice came from the doorway leading back into the castle. The young Lightcaster stood there with Jax and several other children, their faces bright with wonder. "Is it true? The land is healing." "It's true," Briar confirmed. "Does that mean—" Jax hesitated. "Does that mean we're really safe now? That we can stay?" Briar crossed to them, kneeling so she was eye level with the children who'd suffered so much. "It means we're building something worth protecting. Something worth believing in. You're not just safe, you're home." Jax threw his arms around her, and the other children followed. Their lights, once dim and fearful, now blazed with hope and joy. Through it all, the Genesis stone pulsed in the throne room below, the pillars of light stood strong across the landscape, and the kingdom of Silver Peak stepped into its first true dawn. The Genesis Bridge was complete, and the real work was just beginning. But for now, surrounded by children who'd found hope and a mate who'd found his purpose and a kingdom learning to believe in transformation, Briar Nightingale, The forsaken Luminara, who'd become the Genesis Queen, allowed herself one perfect moment of peace. She'd been told her entire life that she was wrong, an abomination, a mistake that needed to be corrected. But standing in the dawn light with her family, chosen and blood, wolf and light and shadow all mixed together, she finally understood the truth. She wasn't wrong. The world had been, and she just helped make it right. 6 months later, the council chamber had changed significantly since Briar first stumbled into it, dying in Kael's arms. Where once only wolf nobles had sat in judgment, now 3 distinct sections accommodated all bloodlines. Lightcasters occupied the eastern wing, their seats carved from crystalline stone that caught and refracted light. Shadow-touched representatives held the western wing, their chairs fashioned from dark wood that seemed to absorb illumination. And in the center, the wolf lords maintained their traditional positions, though their attitudes had shifted considerably. Briar stood before them all, no longer a prisoner awaiting execution, but a queen presenting her vision for the kingdom's future. The integration academies are exceeding expectations, she reported, gesturing to the documents Darius had prepared. We now have 5 facilities where young ones of all bloodlines learn together. Combat training, magical theory, diplomatic studies, all taught with representation from each person. And the incidents? Counselor Malwick asked. He'd become one of Briar's strongest supporters after witnessing the Genesis transformation, though his cautious nature remained. The reports mention conflicts. 12 minor altercations in the past month, Briar acknowledged, down from 37 the month before. Most resolved through mediation rather than punishment. The children are learning faster than their parents. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the chamber. It was true. The younger generation had adapted to unity with remarkable speed, while many adults still struggled with centuries of ingrained prejudice. What of the Northern Waste delegation? Asked Calypso, who now held a permanent seat representing the Shadow-touched. They've been observing for 6 months. Have they made a decision? They have, Kael said, rising to stand beside Briar. Ambassador Rhiannon arrived this morning with formal documents. The Northern Wastes wish to establish a permanent embassy in Silverpick and begin gradual integration with our kingdom. Excited murmurs filled the chamber. The Northern Wastes had been isolated for over 2 centuries. Their willingness to rejoin the broader world was significant. There are conditions, Briar continued. They want assurance that shadow magic won't be criminalized or suppressed, that their cultural practices will be respected, and they're requesting that Marcus serve as liaison between our kingdoms. The chamber fell silent at the mention of the Shadow King. Marcus himself sat in the gallery reserved for observers, his transformed eyes fixed on his daughter. Over the past 6 months, he'd worked tirelessly to earn redemption, teaching at the academies, counseling troubled youth, mediating disputes between bloodlines. But trust was still fragile, and his presence in any official capacity remained controversial. The former Shadow King, Gavel said carefully, his own transformation into an empath had made him painfully aware of others' suffering, including his own victims, has proven his commitment to change. But giving him diplomatic authority is a risk, Briar finished. I know, but the Wastes trust him. He speaks their language, understands our culture. And he's volunteered to be bound by Genesis magic. Any betrayal of his position would cause him physical pain through the empathic transformation. A living insurance policy, Malwick mused. Harsh, but potentially effective. I don't ask for this lightly, Marcus spoke from the gallery, his voice carrying despite not being formally recognized. I know what I've done. I know that many in this room have every reason to deny me any position of influence. But the Wastes are my people. If I can help them find the path to unity that I once tried to destroy, perhaps that's the beginning of actual atonement. Briar watched the council members deliberate through subtle glances and shifted postures. This was democracy in action, messy, uncertain, but functional. Finally, Elder Morphia rose. At her age and with her wisdom, her opinion carried significant weight. 6 months ago, we witnessed the impossible, she said. A kingdom divided for centuries chose unity in a single night. We've stumbled since then. I made mistakes. Faced setbacks. But we're still here. Still trying. She looked at Marcus. Redemption isn't given. It's earned through consistent action over time. The Shadow King has begun earning. Let's give him the chance to continue. The vote, when it came, was narrow but decisive. Marcus would serve as liaison to the Northern Wastes, bound by Genesis magic and subject to immediate removal if he betrayed the trust being placed in him. As the council dispersed, Briar felt Kael's hand find hers beneath the table. Through their bond, she sensed his mixture of pride and concern. "You're playing a dangerous game," he murmured as they exited the chamber, trusting Marcus with real power. "I'm not trusting him," Briar corrected. "I'm trusting the magic binding him. And I'm trusting that he wants redemption more than he wants power. And if you're wrong, then we'll handle it," Briar said simply.
Together.
Like we handle everything else. They walked through corridors that had become familiar over the past months, heading toward the private quarters they now shared. But before they reached their destination, Vesper intercepted them, her young face bright with excitement. "Your Majesties, you have to see this. Jax just manifested a new ability." They followed her to the training courtyard where the young Lightcaster boy stood in the center of a circle of observers. His hands glowed with the familiar silver light of his bloodline, but threaded through it were ribbons of gold and shadow. Genesis power. In a child barely 14 years old. "How is this possible?" Lysander asked, his healer's instincts warring with his scientific curiosity. "He wasn't born with dual bloodlines like the Queen." "Maybe he was," Elder Morpheus said thoughtfully. "Or maybe proximity to the Genesis Stone is changing those exposed to it. Evolution happening in real time." Jax looked up at Briar with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Briar said, kneeling beside him. "You did something new. Something that proves the Genesis Bridge isn't just about me and Kael. It's about all of us. About what we're becoming together." She took his hands, her own Genesis power flowing out to meet him. Where they connected, light blazed, not destructive, but creative. Possibilities unfolding like flowers in Fast Forward. "You're the second generation," Briar told him. "The first to grow up in a unified kingdom. Your power reflects that unity. And you won't be the last." Indeed, over the following weeks, 3 more children manifested Genesis abilities. A wolf pup who could channel light through her transformed state, a shadow-touched girl whose darkness held hints of gold, and a Lightcaster boy whose illumination could take solid form like a void seeker's wings. The kingdom wasn't just adapting to change. It was evolving beyond what anyone had imagined possible. Briar stood on the highest tower one evening, watching the Genesis pillars that still glowed across the landscape. They'd become permanent fixtures, transforming the kingdom's geography into something entirely new. Where once there'd been barren wastelands scarred by ancient battles, now forests flourished. Rivers ran clear. The land itself seemed more alive. "Penny for your thoughts?" Kael asked, joining her on the tower. "I'm thinking about prophecy," Briar said. "Elder Morpheus says I fulfilled it, that I'm the Genesis Bridge the old stories predicted. But I'm not sure that's accurate." "No. I think I started something," Briar clarified. "Opened a door that had been locked for centuries. But the real Genesis Bridge isn't me. It's all of us. Every person who chooses unity over division, who reaches across the boundaries we've drawn and finds common ground. That's the bridge. I'm just the first stone." Kael pulled her close, his warmth solid and reassuring. "You're more than that. You're the cornerstone. The foundation everything else is built on." "Then we'd better make sure that foundation holds," Briar said. Through their bond, she felt his absolute confidence. Not that everything would be easy or perfect, but that they would face whatever came together. 6 months ago, Briar had been a dying girl in chains, believing herself an abomination that deserved darkness. Now she was a queen, a bridge between bloodlines, a symbol of transformation. But more importantly, she was loved. By her mate, by the children she'd saved, by a kingdom learning to believe in impossible things. And in the distance, Working late in his study, Marcus wrote letters to the northern wastes, reaching out to the people he'd once led in isolation, now trying to guide them toward connection. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a journey that lasted a lifetime. But it was a journey worth taking. As the moon rose over Silver Peak Castle, full and bright, and casting silver light across the Genesis pillars, Briar Nightingale allowed herself to believe in the future she was building. A future where light and shadow and wolf weren't enemies, but family. A future where love truly was the bravest choice anyone could make. A future where the impossible happened every single day. The Genesis Bridge was complete, and the kingdom it supported was just beginning to reach its potential. To be continue.